We are now streaming into the YouTube. Just give a couple of seconds. Okay, we are live now. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Web Innovation Week. Welcome to SymposiumX. I'm Rachel Yeager, the head of the W3C chapter in New York Metropolitan and Executive Director of Web Innovation X, think tank for digital transformation. I'll be your host today. The sixth SymposiumX focuses on MAdTech. And it's MAdTech Back to the Future, looking into strategic innovation in marketing and advertising for the future emerging web. Today, we are very honored to have a distinguished panel of speakers. And let me introduce them to you one by one. First, we will have the keynote from Don Marty. He's from Cafe Media. And we will have Garrett Johnson, professor from Boston University, as a panel speaker. We will also have Robin Burgeon from the New York Times. And we have Aaron Zagershaw, who is from the Washington Post. And we have amazing W3C leaders, Alan Bird, who will be opening the session shortly. And of course, we have Wendy Salsa, chair of the Improving Web Advertising Business Group. And she's also the counsel and strategy lead at W3C, who is going to address the crowd, the audience in a bit. Let me now turn to Alan. Thank you.
Thanks, Rachel. Let me, Anna. So it's a pleasure to be here on day 4 of SymposiumX Innovation Week. I hope everybody gets as much out of today as the participants have earlier in the week. I am Alan Bird. I'm the Global Business Development Leader for W3C. One of the many things I do is work with our chapters to help promote local outreach and expansion of our membership base. So I have just a brief presentation to kind of give an overview of W3C for those of you that aren't familiar with us, as well as just a very light introduction to the work we're doing in web advertising. So W3C is the global steward of web standards. The gentleman on the right is Tim Berners-Lee. He invented the web when he was a researcher at CERN. And he invented the web about 5 years before he formed the consortia to make sure we keep the web free and open for everybody forever. We are a member-based consortia with about 400 members around the globe, everything from the biggest to the big to startups and everything in between. One of the key factors for the web platform is it's built on royalty-free standards. So whenever somebody makes a technical contribution to W3C, they make it in a royalty-free fashion. When you type www.anything, you don't pay a tax, right? The web is out there and available for people to use. And anyone has the right to implement any of our standards. There's not a licensing fee for our standards. Why are they important? I'm not going to read this chart to you, but basically standards make life easier and you gain the volume of all of our members working to solve a problem versus your in-house solution that's subject to underpinning technologies changing on you. Currently, W3C focuses on three major areas. Our core web capabilities, I'll talk about that more in a little bit. What we call Web for All, I'll talk about that briefly. And then what we're really going to focus on today is our industry applications areas that we focus in on. So we call the core web the open web platform. Some of you may know it as HTML5, but it's really all those core standards that make the web work. And it's what we're building on top of it that is specific to given industries like web advertising or automotive or publishing or WebRTC or any of those kinds of things. It is an open platform for all. It is accessible. It has internationalization built into it. And security and privacy are at the core of what we do. So those are very important. And there are nearly 2 billion websites today. That's a phenomenal number. You know, before we were talking, I was in a meeting earlier today where we were talking about, could you imagine, 15 years ago, we didn't think anybody would need video on the web. And now we've got full sessions like this and, you know, 2 billion websites. It's pretty amazing. Web for all, that's really about accessibility, making sure the web is accessible to anybody, regardless of their different abilities or capabilities. Internationalization, making sure the web can render your language in your in the format that you want, whether it's left to right, right to left, top to bottom, whatever. The web should be able to handle all those languages, all those different character sets, and we have an active work on that. Privacy and identity, making sure that you are in control of which pieces of your identity are given up at which situations. That is part of the work we're doing around web advertising. I'm sure you'll hear more about that as well. And security, any of the work we're doing, making sure we're not opening a security breach in the web to allow bad people to do bad things. So let's talk about what industries we look at. So these 8 industries that are listed here are really think of them as the vertical spaces that we look at. And we can go into the detail. And if you want detail on any one of these, feel free to reach out to me. I'm easy to find, alan.bird@w3.org. And I can go into detail or have somebody from my team do that. But today we're going to focus on what's in the red circle, advertising. And this isn't general advertising. This is advertising on the web. And what do we need to do that? So I didn't realize that build was in there. So what do we mean by improving web advertising? Well, we're providing a discussion forum for the consideration of the features the web needs to think about. And that means we've got everybody in the conversation. We have about 200 organizations in our web advertising work today. Everybody from publishers to browsers to users, the entire system, sitting, listening, and exchanging ideas on what could possibly happen. When we think about the third-party cookie going away, these are all the ecosystems and all the parties that are involved in that conversation. Everything from publishers to marketers and agencies and the people in between, the buy side and sell side services, as well as the browser. But for today's conversation, we're really going to just we're focusing in on the publishers. That's what we've got here. That's really the core of the conversation for today. And Wendy will lead the panel, and Don's keynote will focus on what advertisers need and what we're doing. Why should a publisher join the group directly? To help shape the solutions to make sure they work the way you want. To protect your business, because you as a publisher know what your needs are, and letting a third-party representative speak your voice might not be in your own best interest. And turn early insights into advantages. When you see how the conversations are going, you'll know what you need to do with your technology and your platform. And time is of the essence. The third-party cookie is going to be phased out in early 2021. So we've got just a little bit over 14 months to work our way through all of this. So come join us. If you're interested in W3C, talk to Rachel, talk to me. The more members we have, the more we can do, and the more diversity we have in our voices, the better we think the results are. So that's what I've got, Rachel. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we have Wendy Salsa.
Thanks. I'll speak briefly because I know what you really want to hear is the experts who are participating in our groups. The Improving Web Advertising business group, as Alan mentioned, is a forum for discussion that's at the early end of our standardization process. So W3C produces voluntary consensus standards. We aim to help interoperability on the web, but voluntary consensus works only when everybody who's a participant in the ecosystem recognizes some value from joining that consensus. So we have lots of discussions in the group about needs and use cases from various parties, from browsers, from users, from publishers, from technology providers, and from each of them, we try to pull out, what's required, what do you need to do business, what do you need to engage in commerce, in social interactions and discussions on the web, and what does the web need to do to meet those needs. One of the benefits of a broad multi-stakeholder conversation is we have the opportunity to explore changes in the underlying platform. We can change features about the web if we can get the consensus of the participants there to do it. And so we've seen sort of two strands of work coming together. One is an increased focus on privacy. Users of the web are becoming increasingly concerned that they need a trustworthy platform to understand where their data is and how their data is being used, in order to engage in web activity. They want that reassurance, and browsers are taking steps, including those Alan mentioned, to help users with privacy, to reduce the incidence of individually identified cross-site tracking. And another strand of protecting the open web is providing monetization opportunities, making sure that those who want to publish on the web have opportunities to reach users and to reach paying customers, or to get paid for their work. Might be advertising has been a key way to provide monetization to content producers. So we're looking at how do we build privacy and monetization that go hand in hand? How do we provide the tools for measurement, attribution, reporting, optimization, without being overly invasive and crossing the line into creepy tracking of users? What can we build that offer new primitives for the web discussion? And so we've been having in the Improving Web Advertising business group a rich discussion of proposals and use cases, and those of you who aren't yet participating there, if you have interest, come take a look and come join us. In W3C processes, we have first this incubation stage, and then as things progress, they may be moved to working groups for standardization, and we have plenty of opportunities to discuss that. So I will turn it over there and
thank you, Wendy.
Conversation.
Yes, very important information that you've just shared. I just want to remind the audience in the webinar that there's this Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. You can click on it to ask questions anytime. We have already also received a number of questions from when you are registering, and we have already distributed those questions to our speakers. And so this will be a very interactive session, as much as you like, and we will be addressing those questions as you speak. Now I invite Dawn to show your video. I mean, you're showing your video, and unmute yourself. I mean, and the rest, please put your video off, the other speakers, so that only Dawn's is showing. Okay, I will just. Okay, I'll stop the video for all other speakers. All right. So, so Dawn Marquis, it's my great pleasure to introduce you again as our keynote. and I'm actually looking forward to this presentation. Very exciting contents you have prepared. So I'll let you lead us now. Thank you, Don.
All right. Good morning. Can everyone hear me all right? All
Yes.
right. Okay, great. So just a little bit to introduce myself. So I think I am the only person I know who has purchased web advertising and edited an ad-supported site, and had root on the servers of a major ad tech company, and written an ad blocker, and worked at a web browser company. So I've seen a lot of these interesting problems in the technology space from a lot of different points of view. And so I'm really interested in talking about a kind of unprecedented time in history when we're seeing the dominance of a few major technology companies over a large portion of the industry. Could I get slide 2? Next slide. Yes. I'm talking, of course, about the late 1960s, in which IBM completely dominated the market for general purpose digital computers. There's always been a kind of cycle of centralization and decentralization going on in the information technology business. Next slide, please. So, of course, we had the microcomputer boom, and then the IBM PC leading into the Microsoft Windows era, then the explosion of companies in the dot-com boom. So the cycle keeps turning, and we, when we look at the work of today's companies, we can try to put things into perspective. Next slide, please. The death of the third-party cookie. These are actually not third-party cookies, by the way. These are first-party cookies. I made them. The death of the third-party cookie is often seen as a problem of centralization. And so if third-party cookies go away, and we don't have the ability for multiple players on the World Wide Web to see data from each other, then isn't that just a powerful force for consolidation? And that's an area where the work of the W3C's Improving Web Advertising Business Group is critically important. Next slide, please. Okay, from my favorite slide to my least favorite slide. I really think this needs to be cleaned up. The graphic design here is really busy. Wouldn't this slide look better with just a few logos on it? There's a big difference, though, between some overdue consolidation in the space and a move toward extreme centralization, which, of course, nobody in most companies would want to see. So let's have a look at the open plan office. Next slide. All right, this is the open plan office of its day. These are yew trees planted by King Henry VIII at Hampton Court Palace. So why do you plant yew trees? Well, this is a palace that's being visited by technology partners or diplomats from all around the countries that King Henry VIII would interact with. And the reason that you do a big ornamental planting like this is to show off that you have the power to devote your land to ornamental plants instead of just having to grow food crops everywhere. And of course, these are U trees, which gives a subtle reminder of everyone, or to everyone, of the power of the English longbow. And today, there are a few extremely large companies that are capable of participating in the web standards process at an extremely powerful level. So you'll show up, and yes, there can be complete implementations of extremely complex proposals standing up and demonstrating the power of particular companies to do consolidation of the web business. Next slide, please. So this is an example of an early web server rack from one of the companies that's today grown up to be extremely powerful. And back in the day of Linux first catching on in the web, as a previous slide, please. Back in the day of Linux first catching on as an operating system for the web, it was used for commodifying the servers. So some of the first web companies came out and they'd have servers from, say, Digital or Sun powering large websites. And the innovation that led to the giant companies of today was commodifying the inputs to the system and essentially beginning to commodify everything that a company touches. So going from one brand of server to a different brand of server or a stack of janky motherboards in some cases was a pretty constructive move. But what we're seeing today is that worked so well for commodifying the hardware business that it's being applied to everything. It's being applied to commodifying content, commodifying services, commodifying labor. So next slide, please. So a lot of attention is paid to big data as a buzzword or artificial intelligence as a buzzword. And I'm going to argue that all of these terms are encapsulating a common phenomenon, which is pushing value to a centralized reputation graph, a data structure that allows one company to evaluate which other participants in the system are better or worse for specific purposes. Building up that reputation graph internally while extracting or commodifying the value of every other good and service in the system. And so this is something that's a common pattern across the gig economy. It's a common pattern across large social sites. It's a common pattern across what's often lumped together as, quote, the tech industry. So a question that we got before this talk is, well, if data becomes available mostly through these centralized giant companies, the only people who have access to these large reputation graphs, then won't marketing just all move to these large companies? So next slide, please. And this is this is one possible future that helps address that question. And yes, there is a commodification process going on right now with content participating in a race to the bottom. But brands are also economic players that are subject to commodification. And so this is a large tech company's portal for checking on who is using my personal information. And All Family Gift is or actually BM00704 is a company that's directly competing with established brands to sell me branded goods and services. So yes, there's the risk that in the consolidation of the personal information industry, that brands will be forced to deal with larger companies in order to reach consumers. But brands are not immune to the commodification effect that publishers are seeing. There's no reason to expect that large internet companies will first commodify the companies like Compaq and Dell that might sell servers to them. And then as a next step, they're going to commodify the New York Times and the Washington Post that produce content. And then are they just going to stop before they commodify, say, Oreos? And that's not how it goes. And that's a consolidation dystopia story. And I hope I can get more into that later on. But on the internet, we love our dystopia stories. And we've had the cryptography key escrow dystopia. We've had the copyright maximalism and digital rights management dystopia story. And today, of course, we're having the surveillance marketing and data consolidation dystopia story. Now, those first two stories, the crypto one and the DRM one, those two issues are both still problems on the internet, but they haven't turned into complete dystopia because there's been a set of factors pushing back and leading to things not going all the way bad, kind of cycling back. So what, if anything, is going to make the data consolidation dystopia story cycle back? Next slide, please. So I'm coming to you from California, and I can answer this question from a California point of view. So what is the practical limit on big tech consolidation? I can't answer that completely, but are there factors pushing back against consolidation that are going to be meaningful? Well, from a California point of view, I can say yes, there are. And as you've probably heard, in the California election that just happened, the California Privacy Rights and Enforcement Act, sometimes called Proposition 24, recently passed with 56% of the vote. So 56% of the vote, though, it turns out it's way below what CPRA had originally polled at. So when they did polls of California voters before CPRA passed, then it came in at 78 to 88%. So did the large tech companies manage to make the case to California people that, yes, we should continue to be able to do our data practices. Well, next slide, please. This is the information that actually went out to California voters about Proposition 24. And the entire argument against Proposition 24 was that Proposition 24 will allow all of these practices that are currently already being done. Proposition 24 was written with input from giant tech corporations. So if you look at that 56%, yes, only 56% voted to have you walk the plank, but a good fraction of the other 44% voted for having you keel hauled first. Next slide, please. CPRA is the second generation California privacy law, and we've already got one, which is CCPA, California Consumer Privacy Act. And just a quick reality check from the IAB, they recently surveyed corporate privacy lawyers, and they found that only about 1 to 5% of people who are given the opportunity to exercise their CCPA privacy rights actually go ahead and do so. And a majority of companies just go ahead and make CCPA rights available to everyone. Now, the 60% of businesses making CCPA rights available, that you have to put an asterisk on that, because that's 60% of businesses that are big enough and engaged enough to send a privacy lawyer to meet with the IAB. So the actual percentage is probably a little bit lower, but CCPA is having influence on privacy features that are being made available even outside of California. Next slide, please. So what happens when you actually do exercise your CCPA rights? Well, I am one of that 1 to 5%, and I've been sending out CCPA opt-outs. The process is really kind of a pain still, and the percentage of people who vote for privacy stuff is high, but the percentage of people who actually go ahead and do the privacy stuff is a lot lower. So the only thing less popular than creepy nerds is making yourself do creepy nerd stuff. Next slide, please. I do think that privacy law is going to be a bigger impact and have a decentralizing effect on big tech, though. And that's because not only do California voters just keep passing privacy initiatives until this stuff stops, but the laws are increasingly making it possible for organizations to take some of these actions on behalf of consumers. And this is a Consumer Reports CCPA authorized agent study that I worked on as a consultant for Consumer Reports. And the striking thing about this is for a project intended to reduce the impact of direct marketing on people's lives, it had a response rate that any direct marketer would envy. We had a whole process of recruiting emails and sending things out to various lists and following up, and we didn't have to use any of it because the first email to the first list filled up the entire study group. It's incredibly popular with consumers to be able to say, let me push one button and make this stuff stop. So I don't think this is a silver bullet for putting end users completely in charge of their personal data. There's a strong trend among activists to say that we're headed for some kind of privacy or data control utopia in which people are going to have a high level of control. But I do think that it's kind of a counterweight to centralization trends. In other words, as a company gets big enough and high enough impact to drive meaningful centralization, it's also going to provoke changes on the consumer privacy initiative side and on the consumer privacy technology side to help balance that out. Next slide, please. So the market design for advertising is an extremely fruitful area. This machine on the left is the lead melter from a linotype machine. And somehow the publishing business managed to come up with a high margin, repeatable, sustainable advertising model when they were breathing the fumes from molten lead all day. So we've got a huge opportunity right now to redesign the market for web advertising in such a way that it is acceptable to the audience, as in not forcing the kind of consolidation that tends to get pushed back, while at the same time producing the kind of reputation effects that make advertising worth buying in the long run. If the entire reputation graph lives inside a big company, then there can be no brand equity. There can only be bits within someone's centralized score. And that's not the peak economic value that can be obtained in this situation. So I'm highly encouraged to be participating in the Improving Web Advertising Business Group. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what kind of models we can come up with. So next slide, please. Thank you very much. And I should be available to take questions.
Thank you, Don. Very a great presentation. I'm looking at the questions. I don't see any questions coming in, but I do want to ask you. First, I want to go back, if you do not mind. We started with the last slide, and one of the things being a great presenter is that you practice beforehand together with me just now, and I just want to show this Back to the Future, this first slide that we started with, Don, I just want, I thought that is amazing that you use the metaphor to illustrate the ecosystem. Do you have any comments about this, whether a closed and open ecosystem? How does it, what are the pros and cons? You know, I mean, it seems to me some of the questions that I'm seeing are alluding to that a closed ecosystem is more like faster. Maybe you can do better measurements, and in terms of what the publisher and the smaller publisher can maybe have easier way of getting the content out there. But so do you want to comment on that?
Sure. And I think that unfortunately in this election cycle, we've seen a lot of the limitations of centralization. And so from the point of view of a large tech company, there's constant pressure to lower the costs of functions such as moderation and ad review. And so you end up with moderators and ad reviewers who are doing these very stressful jobs that expose them to a lot of say terrorist material or child abuse material online. And they're up against very dedicated misinformation operations. So when people rely on those centralized reputation graphs as an information source, then they're getting a source of information that's been weaponized by highly motivated bad actors, whether they're financial scammers or political extremists or both. And so when smaller or independent publishers are involved, there's a media ethics point of view, there's a labor of love point of view on that content that tends to make it higher reputation and more reliable in a way that a big company whose algorithm is constantly being tested and gamed by special cases really can't do.
Thank you. We have a question from Charlene, she asked, how do we balance the need for privacy with the need for advertisers to know that a user is legitimate?
Well, people have a trust relationship with their web publishers or publishers in general. And so there is very personal information that people will share with a trusted content brand that they won't share with some big bad internet company in general. I know this from the point of view of having been editor of Linux Journal, and some of the most rewarding letters to the editor that I ever received were people who had been reading Linux Journal in prison. And of course, they didn't generally have access to an actual Linux box, but then when they got out, they're able to get some kind of an IT job. And people share personal information with their trusted publishers, writers, editors in a way that a big internet company can never get. And the way to use that information appropriately in a way that you can say to an advertiser, yes, I have this highly engaged audience, is a very fruitful field. So I would pop in and look at the trust tokens sessions at the World Wide Web Consortium when those come up.
Extending this question, I'm just, can you also talk about like distinguishing whether it's a real person versus a bot?
Oh, real people do a lot of real people things, and real people are better at recognizing other real people than artificial intelligence systems are. So just to give an example, the 90210 area code in the USA has more Facebook users than people, which is not surprising because most people outside the USA, if they've only heard of one zip code, they've heard of 90210. And so those networks of trust of, yes, this is a real human reader, are much more reliable if it's a publisher that has a subscriber or someone who's been engaged with interacting with them for a while, than if it's just some big tech company saying, trust us, look at all these people we have watching videos, you can pivot to video now.
Interesting. We do have one more questions, but we are going to ask, I saw a question coming from Daniel, but it will be asked, Aram, the panel speaker will be answering that question. So I don't think that there's any more questions, but there are any follow-up questions because it's an extremely interesting topic. I will be interacting with the audience, and whoever have registered for this webinar, definitely we can follow up, and I will direct them to Dawn if you have further questions, even after the webinar. But I just want to say thank you to Dawn for delivering this keynote, very strong metaphors and very good illustration. Thank you so much for presenting and being the keynote for SymposiumX. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And I have some links, so I'll that's my Twitter handle. So follow me there, and I'll tweet the links to some of these sources. Yeah,
if you can also put it in the chat, and I will be distributing to everybody as well. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to invite now I'm inviting now the panelists to be ready. Would the panelists, can you show yourself? Can you open up your video? And starting with Garrett, yes, thank you. And I'm going to ask everybody else to stop your video if you can. All the speakers, if you're not speaking, please stop your video, and I will just stop everybody's video. Okay, except for the panelists. And then Garrett, and I'm going to stop sharing. If you are going to share something, I'm going to invite first Garrett Johnson. Thank you so much for joining us today. So I'll let you introduce and present your lightning talk.
Great. Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk today. I am an academic. I'm a professor at Boston University, and the focus of my research is on digital marketing, and a big part of my research looks at privacy issues and the economics of digital ad identity, which I'm going to talk about today. So I'll begin with what is the value of cookies, and preface this by saying in the status quo. And we begin with what work are cookies actually doing. So cookies allow for cross-site digital ad identity. This powers the three key value generators of digital marketing, digital advertising. So the first is targeting. Now there's a lot of focus on sexy things like behavioral targeting, but very elementary things such as ad frequency and reach management are allowed by cross-site measurement. Next, there's measurements, the ability to do ad effectiveness measurement and cross-site attribution. And finally, the ability to automate this at scale and optimize and redeploy campaigns. So there's several studies that have looked at the value of cookies, including research by myself. And the research has typically found that without cookies, ad prices are 50 to 70% lower. And this includes research by the UK regulator. Now there's one outlier, which finds a figure of only 4%. However, even in that study, the raw difference in impressions between cookied and cookieless impressions was 40%. So we start from this point where identity is really valuable. It increases ad revenue by something like 2 to 3x. But this is, of course, in the status quo. And so the question is, what happens when we get rid of cookies? What happens to advertising? And in my mind, the future of advertising has 4 tentpoles. The first is context, then sign-in or hashed email solutions, then the walled gardens, namely Google and Facebook, and then finally the birds, which are these proposals for in front of the WC3. So when we start with context, the challenge with context is that it has a scale problem. A minority of content is valuable to advertisers. And in particular, general and news content does even worse than some of the figures I gave you on previous slides. And this is important because we want good quality news content, and we want reporters to be able to make money from the work that they do. So then we move to sign-in, which is an improvement in that it solves this cross-site identity problem. It in fact goes further. It solves the cross-device identity problem. The limitation here, though, is scale. It's unclear how many publishers and users are going to participate in this, though there's a lot of momentum in industry right now to move in that direction. And certainly the economics are such that identity is valuable. Next, we have the walled gardens. And here we have a phenomenon of the rich get richer. And that's because these companies of Google and Facebook are going to still have the ability to examine cross-device identity, to have very large scale, to have ease of use for advertisers. And so their ability to do what they do may be somewhat degraded, but the phrase "in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king," I think is really apt here. And so what I worry is that when we move to a world without cookies, we're going to have a smaller pie, and that pie is going to be distributed more unequally. So lastly, we come to the birds. And the birds are affectionate names for the various proposals in front of the WC3, which have all sorts of colorful acronyms that all are referred to birds. And this is, of course, in honor of Alan Bird, our first presenter. No, I'm just kidding. But these proposals have, they're kind of technically complex, but they basically have the idea that, like, if we move advertising away from focused on an individual and towards focused in on groups, then it can be okay with privacy. Now, the challenges here is that there's privacy is in tension with many things. So the first is measurement and targeting. If you're targeting large groups instead of individuals, and if you're getting measurement after hours or days rather than instantaneously, this degrades the capability for digital advertising to do what it's been able to successfully do. The second tension is with competition, because if you are going to be only targeting groups of a certain size, then this advantages large companies that are able to target many such groups and disadvantages small companies that may not have sufficient scale to target large groups. And then the final tension is the tension with centralization and decentralization. Many of these proposals propose to centralize all information within a trusted server in order to have these privacy guarantees, which has risks, but there's also risks on the other side where some proposals advocate putting all the power at the level of the user browser, and that has some challenges too. So the last thought I want to end with is that this debate about the future of advertising and the value of cookies is a very contentious one. But I think that some of this is a matter of perspectives. And I say that because it's pretty easy to predict what people's perspective is based on whether they're at a browser, at a publisher, at an ad tech firm, or an advertiser. In fact, I'd go even further and say I can predict your point of view based on whether your browser has also is a company that owns an ad tech company, and whether you're a small browser or a very large browser. So I think it's important to keep an open mind. All of us are continuing to learn in this space. The future is starting to become clear, but we still have a lot of work to do, and the WC3 is playing an important part in that. So thank you. Look forward to the panel discussion and the other speaker talks.
Thank you. Next is, thank you, Garrett. That's very refreshing. And I do think that Alan Bird is more adorable than that. So, so next is Robin, Robin John. Yes. Thank you, Robin. You can present. Yeah.
Hang on. No, Zoom's having problems today. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
No problem. I've been pressing all the button too fast or too too. No worries.
Refuses. Hang on. Maybe go to Aram. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Sorry
And
about that.
Robin, if you want to send your presentation to me via email, I can present it for you.
No, it's okay. Thanks. It's just like every time Zoom updates, it no longer has the right to share. Sorry about that. It updated in the middle of the previous presentation. Sorry about that. I'll be right back.
I hear you. No problem. All right. So Aram, I think that you're ready, right? So yeah.
Yep. If you could unmute my video, I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yes, Aram. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Aram Zuckersharf. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how the future is coming at us fast and what we can do to embrace it. For a little context, and maybe this does make my point of view a little predictable, but I work for the Washington Post. We are a publishing company, but we also own this platform called Zeus, which is an advertising technology platform from a publisher focus. So those are the two aspects that sort of influence my perspective. So let's talk about the future. It is going to radically change. The death of the third-party cookie is definitely coming at us, and it is coming at us fast. And it provides us with a number of challenges. Everything is in motion. The status quo is threatened. So we have to take a look at this and say, how do we take our strengths as individuals, as companies, and our relationships with the folks that we advertise to, our readers, all of those folks, and create a better world, one in which we can have a sustainable web, and we can have a sustainable business for journalism. So according to the World Federation of Advertisers, the status quo is probably not good. The very inaccuracy implied in this statistic tells us that there's a lot of probably fake people, fake sites, and fake advertising campaigns out there making a mess of the web. So while these changes provide us with a challenge, it's also an opportunity. We can take a step back from the current state of web advertising, the current state of marketing technology, and say, this isn't working, and this privacy is an opportunity, one we can embrace to change the status quo, not try and recreate it. And the post third party cookie world, it may not change in a snap. It may change a little bit slower than that. One of the big things we've seen, just as an example, is the idea that there's going to be some sort of unified ID that is building out the new third-party cookie, but the technology is already on the move to move against that. As we look forward to the future, the main thing to note is we have a choice. We can recreate the situation we have now, this arms race between advertising technology companies and publishers and big tech and our users and our privacy advocates and our regulators, or we can look at it as an opportunity. Instead, what does privacy potentially bring us? What can we build upon in a more private world? This gives us opportunities for faster performance. It lets us reach out to readers as a publisher and see if we can put them in control through various privacy measures, transparency, and things like the global privacy control, which Robin brought forth, and we are in the process of adopting. It increases the value of the first-party data that publishers have and makes us more valuable to advertisers and to build out relationships with advertisers, brands, and readers. It brings forth a increase in contextual targeting and the opportunities around that as a technology, along with predictions on contextual and the opportunity to sync our contextual through off-site partnerships. We can enrich our data with insights, and we can increase user trust by giving them more reasons to log in. And this gives us a great moat around our readers and our users to say, you know, this information is valuable and you can only find it through interactions with publishers. And it also brings forth new types of ad systems, server-based dynamic ad insertion being a great example. It is a technique that is popular for podcasts right now, but it's going to probably be opened up as an opportunity in other platforms as well in a more private world. It also means we all have to participate in these discussions. Everyone here is obviously involved in the W3C to some degree already, but you know, this is an opportunity to build out this new future by interacting with the consensus-based standards building that's happening at the W3C and figuring out where we want to bring the web by finding the areas in which we can interact and what's important to us in this new future. The main thing to remember is the end of cross-site individually targeted ads is coming. It is inevitable, and it's our role to collaborate and build that next version of the web as equals. I put my Twitter handle up front. I'm very easy to find on there. If questions come up to you afterwards, please hit me up on there or via email. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. A lot of great information there. I know that questions are already pouring in. I will hand it to the panelist section later. So please, audience, please continue to pour in the Q&A. I now invite Robin. Are you ready?
It looks like I am. Do you see my slide? Yes, excellent.
Yes, excited. All right, great. Yeah.
So let's get going. So yeah, and by the way, I do recommend that you go read Aaron on Twitter. He's always excellent. So hi everyone. I'm just gonna try to see if we can spend 300 seconds on digital advertising today. So, you know, very quickly, a common issue in digital advertising is that the problems are so big and pervasive that we tend to focus on only one problem at a time. But the ecosystem has become such a tangled mess of flaming garbage that putting out just the one fire often only serves to fan the flames of the neighboring ones, or put differently, if you cut off one head, two more grow in its place. So let's look at a few problems. I don't claim that I'm listing all the problems here. There just isn't enough time in a single lightning talk for that. But I can list enough to hopefully show that just tweaking things at the margins won't be enough. We need thorough reinvention. So, you know, surveillance to start with is the issue that you can't fail to know about already. Largely, you know, digital advertising is built on pretty much the biggest surveillance machine ever devised. And this has amply been described in the press, but what people don't realize is that some of the most terrifying investigative articles on digital surveillance are usually built from tiny data sets that are just a small fraction of the total surveillance happening at any one time. And you know, data about you is power over you, and the web is built on trust. It's a core value of the web that you can load up any web page without worrying about permissions and about what it might do to you. And this sort of free-for-all of constant tracking, including location and sensitive information such as health, really damages the fabric of the web and the trust that people have in it. It's a system in which users have been completely forgotten and systematically betrayed. And of course, they will be fighting back. And, you know, from a news publisher perspective, this really matters because for news to be trustworthy, the sites carrying it need to be trustworthy too. And you can't be trustworthy if you're betraying your users' privacy at the same time. Another aspect, and Aaron touched on that as well, is that there is so much fraud in digital advertising that no one can even agree on how to count it. Even the companies specialized in fraud measurement and fraud prevention are routinely decried as fraudulent themselves. Honestly, you know, having been working on this for a little while, I'm sometimes shocked that an actual ad ever gets shown to an actual person, and let alone that someone would actually click on it. So, you know, at the end of the day, the most sensible way to think about digital advertising today is that everything is fake. It's all fake. It's fake all the way down. And in fact, there's an interesting book from Tim Huang in which he makes a very good case that the financialized ad market, which is what we have today, is presently essentially in a pre-2008 state, and that the bubble will soon burst with, you know, very negative consequences all around. On top of this, you know, there's a lot of bad ads out there. So on the rare occasions when an actual human sees an actual ad, a lot of the time it's bad. Even the legitimate ads that aren't, you know, trying to break into your computer somehow or run some cryptocurrency fraud scheme tend to be appallingly coded. They tend to be a kitchen sink of JavaScript with dozens of needless HTTP connections, huge images, et cetera, et cetera. There's absolutely no safety in this supply chain, and users at the end of the day just want to block everything, and why wouldn't they? So a core issue here is that publishers aren't sufficiently empowered to check, and no one else cares about ad quality. We also have a systemic issue of insider trading. If you look at programmatic as an electronic market, which it really is, then when an ad server, for instance, uses the data it observes in order to advantage its own trades, that's insider trading. In other markets, people go to jail for that. But by and large, the ad market suffers from this kind of distortion that are really anti-competitive. But here it's just advertisers and publishers who simply get less value than they deserve. We also have a strong problem of opacity, you know, unsurprisingly, because so much of it is fake. No one has the last idea what's actually going on in the market. And in fact, a recent major study involving dozens of major publishers and major advertisers all sharing data together to try to figure out, you know, where the money went or what was going on, failed to account for 15% of the money. And that's for premium publishers and premium advertisers. You know, a previous example is the famous header bidder natural experiment, in which when publishers succeeded in introducing just a little bit of competition to Google, they saw their revenue shoot up 30 to 100%. Why? Well, I'll let you guess. And so overall, you know, the system is completely unsustainable. That might be the worst part, is that the mission of advertising is meant to support publishers and publishers on the web so that, you know, users can have access to quality content. But, you know, all this broadcasting of identity that is inherent to the status quo devalues publisher audiences. And in the US alone, newsrooms have halved in size in the past 15 years, and the situation is similar elsewhere. The impact on democracy, of course, is immediately noticeable. So, you know, things are pretty bad. What can we do about it? I don't claim to have all the answers, but I do know that we need more than just, you know, a small reform here and there. So first, one of the things we need to reform, or one of the things we need in order even to bring innovation back to ad tech, is to make sure that we have trustworthy browsers. You know, if the browser cannot be trusted not to be a surveillance device itself, then we're going to be stuck with distrust from both users and from the industry. We need to rely on browsers, and for that, we need them to be reliable. We need them to be trustworthy agents of the user. And, you know, at the W3C level, that means defining what it means for a browser to be trustworthy. We need safe creatives. You know, ads can currently be largely random, and publishers have too little power to enforce ad quality. We can make ad creatives much more statically checkable. This would help a lot. We can turn them into locked bundles, essentially, that would have to contain all the resources that they need from the get-go and only be able to communicate outside for specific browser-mediated purposes. We also need, you know, farm-to-table accountability for everything that happens at every step that's involved in showing an ad, and this needs to happen in real time. This includes the financial transactions at every step, you know, any kind of arbitrage, any taxes. currently some of the more shameless vendors claim that they need to operate in secrecy in order to respect advertiser privacy, but advertiser privacy is not a thing. It's completely made up. And so having proper traceability would enable so much more power for publishers and for users. Users would be able to selectively block some ads, for instance, if they went over resource budgets, or block ads from a specific advertiser that's too egregious. This would, this extra power would make for a healthier market. And, in general, the past 20 years of online advertising have been done without the users. We trade in their data, but without them being involved. Some systems, talk about transparency and choice, but that's always a joke or a lie, and it never delivers either. So, over some recent years, browser innovation has brought users back, but we need them to be more than back. We need them to be first, and that means building from privacy. Part of building for privacy means to eliminate identity. Cross-context identity is bad for users and it's bad for publishers, and browsers and SSOs that encourage their users to be recognized across contexts are actually acting against their users. So, we should forget about this trend to try to replace third-party cookies with hashed emails. At some point we need to get the memo. If we start relying on hashed emails for everything, all we'll achieve is to destroy email as a usable login key. It's just not going to work. So we need innovation in MAdTech that does better than just monkeying Google without the scale. Otherwise, it's just going to fail. So we could develop, a system of messageable opaque identity, some kind of single origin identity that would work for the user, and that the origin can contact, but without email. I know this is a lot, and I didn't even cover everything. These are big changes, but I really think we can pull them off. It's not like we have an alternative anyway. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the panel that follows this.
Thank you, Robin. We want to invite now the panelists to open your video so that we can see, we are inviting Wendy Salsa to moderate this panelist session. So Gareth, can you open your video? Let me make sure that, okay. While Gareth is opening up your video, there is an open session, open question in the Q&A. So Wendy will be picking up that question with the rest of the panelists. And I'm going to, thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, panel. I think you gave us sort of some terrific perspectives. And, I heard in each of the presentations references to the values of the open web, the values of a diverse and vendor-neutral platform, both of which are key to what W3C is trying to foster here. I see in some of the questions reference to some of the other perspectives, and it's important to bring those to the table as well. So I'll first go to the question that Josh Coran raised, asking, how can marketers get accountability in systems as they're changing and providing more user privacy. So he refers to marketers relying on neutral third-party organizations for audit of what they buy, to value what they buy, and to buy and optimize as easily across publishers as on a walled garden or silo. Somebody want to?
Yeah,
volunteer?
I can take the first one to some degree for sure. So I mean, I think that the answer is obviously that the current fraud solutions are not effective. If the World Federation of Advertisers can't decide whether it's 2% or 98% of all ads are fraud, and most conservative estimates place it usually above 50%, the answer is that the current systems aren't working. There's a number of proposals currently at play within the web advertising group that would essentially make browsers a more strong source of truth for whether user does human things. But the larger answer, I think, is to create these first-party relationships and use them to qualify what is going on and whether the user is a human being. Don touched on some of that concept earlier, but we can see in the trust token proposals, for example, ways to validate humanity through limited, trustworthy participants. So if you can interact with a user and you can get them to sign in, you can issue them a token saying that they are trustworthy in that system. And that is a good way to look at the anti-fraud question. And I think that's sort of a good piece of it for lending what the solutions are. For valuing and buying and optimizing easily across publishers, I think these things are definitely going to be in play. I think they're going to be structured very differently. You're going to see more of a reliance on working with publishers directly and less on swaths of third-party systems. I'll let other folks speak. I don't want to take up the whole answer.
I think for point 3, we should, think about building better systems to buy from multiple publishers to do federated buying. I think that's definitely an area that's worth investigating in order to ensure that buyers can have scale and that you don't need to buy from every single publisher individually for each of your campaigns. But other than that, I pretty much agree with what Aaron said.
I'll jump in on this too. So I think the question speaks to a concern that I have, which is the difference in capabilities across different ways of advertising. So the walled gardens will maintain the ability to do individual level marketing that is kind of the hallmark of digital advertising today. And if you get rid of identity for the rest of the web, my concern is you're kind of dialing back the clock for that part of the web, where instead of making use of these tools like cross-site attribution, you're purely relying on last click, you're purely relying on large segments and doing media mix modeling. And that really puts the open web at a disadvantage relative to the walled gardens. So that's a big concern. And also the issue of fraud was raised, and I think it's important. I think it's also important to keep in context that like the whole, there is a serious fraud problem, but there also still is a lot of legitimate money and well-working advertising that is going on too. But with respect to the fraud problem, losing identity, I think makes this problem harder to attack than maintaining it. And one data point in favor of that is that fraud rates are higher on Safari and Firefox because those browsers don't have identity. And so it's harder to tell users apart and be able to understand which is fraud and which isn't. So I'm concerned that could get worse rather than better, but maybe these anti-fraud proposals will help shore up against that.
I would add also that there's a number of proposals on how to handle attribution without relying on last click. Some of them are pretty far advanced, and I think that they are likely to go forward and provide good solutions in that regard. In terms of competing with the spaces of the platforms, I think, the assumption that the micro-targeting that something like Facebook does, for example, is intrinsically better in delivering on advertiser needs more effectively, generally has been challenged beyond the fact that we've seen a very large pushback against the idea of brand safety on platforms like YouTube and Facebook. There's also not only does the open web potentially provide a more trustworthy or at least easy to quantify area in terms of brand safety, but also there is a lot of motion we can see around making these things generally easier to track for success, but not for individual users. I think that's important. All of the information that is needed to successfully understand a campaign, maybe it might not come in real time in the future, but it can still potentially be there. And we can have that information through the browser without being forced to identify the user as an individual. And I think the state of proposals there are pretty good.
Yeah, I would tend to say, speaking not just as a publisher, but also as an advertiser with substantial spend, I agree that the walled garden micro-targeting is generally oversold. It might be a good option for the less sophisticated advertisers who feel they can have more control in that space. But in terms of how successful and effective it is, I have serious doubts. We removed pretty much all of the tracking that we have on our site for marketing purposes. We've been relying on MMMs instead, and on targeting methods on Facebook that do not rely on anywhere near as much personal data. And we're being quite successful at acquiring subscribers these days. I think we just broke past 7 million. So I do think that those micro targeting systems are not as good as they're claimed to be. That's not our experience.
Yeah, but I think the market disagrees with you, right? I mean, Facebook gets about 40% of display ad spending, right? 40% of the entire internet.
Sure, but I think that is in part. I think that is in part because of its effectiveness in tracking users cross-site, right? When that advantage goes away, we have a very different universe we're operating in, and the same is true of Google.
And also, I think Facebook has a self-serve offering that publishers currently do not match, and for a vast majority of small advertisers, that is a great way to buy. But this is not intrinsically hinged on the data, right? The market doesn't say that micro-targeting works. The market says that Facebook has convinced people to advertise with them. Those are two very different proposals.
I would love to be able to continue these conversations. I'm afraid we're reaching the end of our time here. I notice some additional interesting questions in the question queue, but I think we're going to have to say to address those, come join us in the Improving Web Advertising Business Group or in some of the other forums at W3C. We have the Privacy Community Group actively discussing other proposals in that realm, Privacy Interest Group, the Web Platform Incubator Community Group, and a whole range of other community and working groups trying to make the web platform better for all of the different needs arrayed around it. So thanks so much for being part of this conversation. Rachel, I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, I was just first, Wendy, thanks for such a great moderation of this panel of excellent speakers. If you have more questions, I think that we can allow a bit more time. It's depending on you, Wendy. Do you want to ask more questions to the panelists? We can stretch our time a bit more, if you wish.
I thought we were closing at the bottom of the hour.
I think it's so exciting to have this in this room. So many exciting panelists. So if you have more questions, we can ask. If not, I can move on and close the SymposiumX at this point. I'm just looking at the open questions. So I think that there's some questions in the Q&A. Is there? Okay. Did we address this from Dennis? Does the panel, yeah. Wendy?
I want to respect everyone's time who you planned for an hour and a half, and if ever and since I haven't checked in whether people are available for longer,
Yeah. I will defer the question and check back to the audience about the question. But thanks for the question from the audience. We will come back to you. I'll reach out back to you. So I thank you, Wendy. Really very exciting group that the IWAG is really very interesting and very important. I actually have one very quick question to ask. Would it be possible, because last year in 2019 SymposiumX, we mentioned the film Minority Report, the one with Tom Cruise, and there's a scene in the movie where where he was bombarded with all this advertisement, right? In the film itself. How far are we from that as a reality? Anyone wants to comment on that? I'm just curious.
The other part of my research is measuring the effectiveness of advertising. And I want to assure people that it's not mind control. It's actually incredibly difficult to measure the effectiveness of advertising because the effects are so small and people's behavior is so hard to influence. So when we talk about like predicting people's behavior, I mean, yes, we can predict that behavior and we can do a better job of that, but the predictions could be still like appallingly poor quality. So I worry that some of this discussion about kind of minority report level predictions and changes in people's behavior is so far from the reality that it colors the public policy discussion in ways that aren't very productive.
Yeah. Thank you for the insights. All right. So with that, I just want to share my screen and just want to thank you, everybody. And I'd like to invite Don Marty that you also open your video if you wish. I just want to say thank you, everybody, to all the speakers, to Wendy for moderating the panel session. What a wonderful moment, right? That we have a group of experts really talking about these very important issues. I also want to direct the audience to know that this SymposiumX is fully recorded on YouTube. We also have the recording distributed on our website, which I'm going to forward those information through the social media channel. All our panelists are very easily reachable also through social channel, and we will follow up with any questions that you may have. I also want to remind everybody that this is a Web Innovation Week, and tomorrow is the last day of the Web Innovation Week. We do have also a fantastic group talking about the workforce, and it's on the digital workforce. And I have invited the CEO of Elevate Network and also Google Chief of Staff, and also Janine Jensen, who is a leader in the Hispanic Women Associations, all the activities. So it would be very interesting also to talk a bit digital inclusion and diversity in that forum. But coming back to today, what a great panel. I just want to, again, thank you all our speakers. And I would like to stop here and wish everybody a good rest of the day. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.